Heart Radio. I'm Annette McCoy, and as always, it is my joy to be with you. And today, as always at this time in the month, I am joined by Janet Hickox.
Hello.
Welcome, Janet. We've got a fabulous show for you talking about the eclipse that happened last night here in Melbourne. Well, it happened everywhere last night, didn't it, Janet?
Well, early this morning, my time, like
right
in the middle of the night.
Just depends on where you were in the world.
Yes, indeed.
Before we start, may I remind everybody that these shows should never replace your legal, medical, nor professional advice, nor your own sound judgment. That said, wherever you are watching this, if you would like to join in the discussion and ask questions, please go over to the Angel Heart Radio Facebook page, because that's where you can make your comments. And Janet, I know you thoroughly enjoy reading people's comments or hearing what they have to say. So we do encourage people, don't we, to join us there and ask the questions.
Yeah, I thrive on questions.
Yes.
Like one of those things I really can't resist is answering a good question. And there is no bad question as far as I'm concerned. So there we have it.
Well, Sarah's jumped online and she's off work and happy to join us. How lovely. I hope that it's a good reason that you're able to relax, Sarah. And that if that
she's
makes
probably
sense.
in the US and it's the end of our work day here. For me, it's 5 p.m.
Right.
So
which makes it 8 p.m. on the East Coast.
Yeah. So they're getting ready to go to bed or something like that.
Something like that. And Asa, I hope that I've said that name correctly. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for joining us too.
She's my stalwart assistant.
Oh, how lovely.
She keeps things running, the admin stuff that I can never get to, it seems, or I have a hard time doing. So she's been my lifesaver.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, aren't we so fortunate, Janet, when we have support and first of all, that we recognize we need support, and then that we have wonderful people who are happy to step up into those positions.
Absolutely. And that we have the technology that allows us to do that, because Asa's parked over near Washington, D.C. I'm in the other Washington on the West Coast. But yet here we are, she's helping me, with my business and branding and graphics and charts, and she's magic.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Asa, thank you so much for being here. Janet,
yes.
That moon. It really had an impact, didn't it?
It did. And I would love to say that I saw that gorgeous moon, but I did not, because the clouds rolled in. I saw it rising, and I had high hopes that meant that the sky was clearing. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. The clouds were just parted for a moment and then they rolled back in. So we didn't get to visualize it or be in the visual of it, but that doesn't, lessen its impact ever. So if you were in a part of the world where it was daytime, so you wouldn't have seen the full moon lunar eclipse, it doesn't mean it didn't have an impact, because the impacts are energetic or spiritual, if you will. And that doesn't depend upon your eyes. It happens, right? Stuff happens. So whether you visualized it or not, it has been an impactful moon, as all eclipses are. Right? They are always sort of impactful. They change. I call them game changers, because they tend to stir up enough stuff that we feel pressured or pushed or pulled to make changes in our lives in some way. And sometimes those changes come about unexpectedly, and then we have this fear that gets triggered. And sometimes, that gives the full moon lunar eclipse or a new moon solar eclipse a bad rap. But in reality, these are times where we can depend upon a course correction, if you will, right? That's how I think about them. They're correcting my course. If I'm going down the wrong path, then something comes along with moon at an eclipse that changes it up. Now, this one was empowered more because it was a super moon. And a supermoon, if you're not familiar with that term, or you've seen the term and wondered what it meant, is when the moon comes within 90% of the closest it ever makes as an approach to Earth. So that means it's very close. That makes it a supermoon. So we had a supermoon in April. May is the most powerful of the supermoons, I believe, or it's either the last of the three. I think it was March, April. May is the most powerful. Then we go back to our regular full moon, from the normal distance it is from the Earth. So we had a moon that was closer than usual, that exerts higher than normal tidal pressure on the planet, which can mean volatility in things like volcanoes or earthquakes, or, the storms get more raged. They get more power to them, more punch to them. And then also human bodies, which are, about 75 to 80% water, are also feeling the tidal pull. So it's often very emotional. It's often very activated, let's say, in making changes in our lives. Things that we don't expect even.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Janet, we have Jacqueline joining us from Ireland, where it is after 1 a.m. So what a special effort.
A night owl. I love it. You wouldn't catch me up, Jacqueline, but bless you for being here with us at this time of the night for you.
So lovely.
Yeah. Now, so I want to go back a minute to to complete with this full moon, since it's right in our, faces today, is that the moons, the eclipses are often activated before the actual day of the eclipse. So you might even go back 2 weeks from today's date, because that's likely when the first bells were ringing about things that were changing up in our lives. And then we have the eclipse. And then for 6 months later, we have the effects that are rolling in like piece after piece. Now, it's not always that intense as it was at the moment, but the effects are activated until the next eclipse, which for us right now is November 19th.
Right.
So for 6 months now, we may have, as an activated full moon, some repeat of the theme that happens in your life, that was happening in your life right now.
Right. Okay. As Asa is agreeing with us, yes, 2 weeks before. But so it's 2 weeks before and yet months afterwards.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, it is kind of, and it's not unheard of to see eclipse things even longer ahead than 2 weeks. I just say 2 weeks because the new moon happens 2 weeks before the full moon.
Yes.
And it can maybe catalyze what it is that needs to be released in order to make room for what it is that you're trying to do now. So there's usually that 2 weeks coming, but then there are these echoes of this moon. Every time the moon is going to pass now for the next 6 months, every time the moon is going to pass 5 Sagittarius, where the eclipse was, there's going to be some echo, right? We can expect some echo. It might be minor. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be negative, life blowing up, right? It doesn't mean that at all. But it means that there's something related to this full moon lunar eclipse that we'll experience off and on for the next 6 months.
Well, thank you. That's very good information. Interesting to take note of what.
So then also take note of the eclipses that we had in December of 2020 that we were still feeling the echoes of all the way up until this full moon lunar eclipse. So we're always in some way experiencing change in its various facets and dimensions through each of the full moon lunar eclipses, new moon solar eclipses.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think I've mentioned before, friends years ago introduced me to the fact that we write things down that we want, and I get this confused. You do something on the new moon, and then is it on the full moon you put them actually outside so that the light can get to them?
So that's a good question, because in my practice,
Yes.
At the new moon, you're setting intentions, right, for what it is
Yes.
that you want to manifest, and you're
Right.
energizing them through your intentions, through aligning yourself with your mind, your heart, your emotions, and you're releasing them, right? You're not going to keep micromanaging them and,
No.
fooling around and futzing around with them, because that's not what the universe needs. It needs your ability to release. And it's by the full moon that we usually start to see whatever obstacle that might be in the way, something that we might need to release, like maybe that isn't the right timing for that new moon manifestation yet. And some people do ceremony around the full moons as a burning ceremony, like whatever it is that needs to be released, I'm just going to let it go or bring it to a close. So, but I'm sure everybody has a different technique, and they all work, right? Because there's your belief in the fact that it works for you. So,
Right.
but we just usually think of the new moon as a very powerful gate opener, portal opener, initiating moon, and the full moon as a time for release or completion or revelation is the other thing. Something like, aha, oh, duh, that's why that's happening.
Right.
Yeah. So we were just coming through the letting go part.
Right. See, the interesting thing for me there, the important point was you said it depends on what we believe in. If we believe in our actions, if we believe in our thoughts, that's the powerful part, isn't it?
Yes.
So I might respond differently to you. However, it's important that we acknowledge our own differences and our own beliefs and act accordingly.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think there's any wrong way to adopt as an attitude. I mean, if it works for you, it works for you. But the one thing that I usually tell people is to look in your own chart. If you're aware of how the energy of your chart runs, right, where the sign of Sagittarius is, right, because that's where this full moon lunar eclipse was, and it was at 5 degrees of Sagittarius. You find the 5th degree. Whatever might be sitting there in the path of that is going to be different for you. It's going to be different for me. In fact, 5 Sagittarius for me is like in the middle of no man's land. It doesn't affect much in my chart by conjunction. It affects nothing by conjunction, and by opposition, it doesn't affect anything. So was this a full moon that was highly activated in my life? No, really, it wasn't. There were other things, other characters in play at this full moon that likely activated other awarenesses that I became, that came into my consciousness. But someone else, I was doing a chart for someone during the astrology of 2021, after I did that webinar for that, someone who had purchased a reading afterwards, and this particular eclipse was right on her natal sun. You bet that something big is going on in her life. I can't remember who it was, but I remember that we had a conversation around this, because it can be very disconcerting to have an eclipse at a very sensitive point in your chart, and knowing that this might be a time of endings, and that can be, sometimes we're holding on so tight that we are resisting the change or the transformation, and then the universe says, okay, well, I'll just take it away. And then you're like, oh, but no, I need that crutch. So
Asa has a question for you.
Yes.
Does it matter what house that new moon falls in, that we should concentrate on what we want to manifest on? Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, so she means the full moon. Does it matter what house the full moon falls in?
As far as what might be being released? Yeah. Well, it's the same for both moons, new moon and full moon. So in the full moon, we have an opposition of the sun to the moon, right? They're in opposite places in the chart. So it is hitting both, maybe, let's say it's in the 1st and the 7th house. So it's hitting both your personality and who you are in the confines of a relationship. So there could be some relationship challenges going on, right? That, in fact, I just did a chart for someone who had Gemini on the 7th house and Sagittarius in the 1st house. So the Sagittarian eclipse was about them personally having to maybe release something that they've been attached to, or having some wake-up call about who they are in this relationship that they might be in. And Gemini the opposite house is where the sun is right now. So the sun was where the spotlight was shining. So the spotlight shining in the 7th house, while the eclipse, what's being eclipsed is your emotional attachment to what was going on in the 1st house, perhaps. So it can bring up a dynamic and that, you know, can play out in many different ways for everybody. And that doesn't even take into consideration what planets you might have in this case in Gemini or Sagittarius. Now with the new moon, there's only one house involved because the sun and the earth, or sun and the moon, excuse me, are in a conjunction. They're occupying the same degree of space or the same degree of the zodiac. So it's going to be in one house. So it's more focused across just one place, but never underestimate the power of the opposite sign to throw up something in your way. So for example, the new moon solar eclipse coming up on June 10th is at 19 degrees 47 minutes, just about 20 degrees of Gemini. So everybody look to where I have a hair hanging in my eye now that I can't see. I can't feel it, but I mean, I can't.
You can feel it, yeah.
I can feel it, but I can't see it. Anyway, it wants to blur my vision now. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, I don't need my eyes to talk, so get over it. So sometimes the fact that we have two bodies or two planets in the same house draws up from the opposite sign some of the more negative characteristics, right? The things that we don't necessarily want to look at. So a new moon that is occurring as a solar eclipse in Gemini might be stirring up some of those Sagittarius energies, particularly since we've just had the full moon lunar eclipse in Sagittarius. Does that make sense? Like they're like, even though the most focus is going to be in this one house at the new moon solar eclipse, the other house you just can't ignore because that's where the lunar eclipse was.
Right.
Yeah. So that's how you would deal with that with the eclipse period of time. But even in let's just say next month, not next month, but July, when we don't have eclipses at all, those new moon and full moon are still operating, just not with the same power and punch as they are at an eclipse.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now Sarah has joined us.
Hi, Sarah.
Hello, Sarah. Sarah Ravenseye, and she has a comment and a question. In my chart, 11th house is Sagittarius, yet it's my MC. So my work life felt the most heavy. The last month, I have gone through so many wacky circumstances trying to find the right work environment. Today, I tried to let go of my expectations and adapt and accept where I am until I get to a desired work point. But Sag isn't in my 10th. So because it's my MC, well, would that explain why I felt the most weight? It's in 7 degrees and 49 minutes. So does that still affect me?
7 degrees 49 minutes of Sagittarius, you bet, because it was at 5 degrees some minutes of Sagittarius, so very close, right? Very close to that. And I think what she's talking about is that in the house system that I'm now using, it's called whole sign, that all 30 degrees of a sign are in one house. So if you are a Cancer rising sign, then Cancer is going to be everything, all degrees of Cancer are going to be in that first house. What happens then is that the ascendant and the midheaven float, right? So they're going to stay at the same degrees that they're meant to. But sometimes, like in Sarah's case, it puts the midheaven in her 11th house, while the cusp of the 10th house, which is generally speaking in other systems where the midheaven sits, is not going to be in her 10th house, but it's still affecting her 10th house, if that makes sense. But what she really needs to look at, what you really need to look at, Sarah, even though I know I'm not seeing you, but I know you're there, is that the midheaven is in the house of hopes and dreams, goals, and aspirations. So this is giving you an opportunity to get some clarity around why you are maybe sticking in a situation that isn't really of your own hopes and dreams, right? So the midheaven here is asking you to find work and that resembles your passion, where you feel really good about yourself, where you really feel good about what you're doing, that you're accepted, that the environment that you're in feels good. And so you have sort of this dual connection to claiming your authority in the 10th house, but it having to be aligned with what your aspirations, your goals, and your dreams are. I hope that makes sense. Like, it doesn't happen like that for everybody, by the way, using whole sign. I've noticed it a few times. For the most part, the MC or midheaven almost always lands in the 10th house, but periodically it does that little split. So gives them a sort of dual focus. And if the midheaven is triggered because it's in Sagittarius, then you can bet that the house that the midheaven rules, which would be the 10th, is also implied and hit. So, good question.
Okey-dokey.
Yeah, but if you have more questions about that, Sarah, feel free to ask.
Right, no, Sarah's saying yes, thank you so much. She's very, very happy.
Yeah, good. And Sarah, you and I've had this conversation, not this exact conversation, but one like this, about it's really time for you to get clarity around where you want to be. Where do you feel honored? Where you feel loved? Where you feel accepted, cherished, recognized, valued? And if that's not where you are right now, then that's going to create this feeling of stress and worry, even, or ill at ease feeling. So it's really important for you to follow your passions, follow your dreams.
And let's face it, Janet, that's a message for everybody. We all need to be able to say, you know, am I happy? What am I content in where I am, what I'm doing? And what can I do about it if I find that I'm not?
I can tell you, if you find that you're not, then you get a human design reading so that we can find out what it is that is your authority. How is it you make the best decisions for you and set you up to be able to choose what is right for you, what is correct for you. Astrology can do that somewhat too, but human design really just zeroes right on in, because we have your type. We know that there's a strategy associated with that type, and you have an authority that becomes sort of your tool that you have, extra tool to help you make good decisions for you. Unfortunately, we have all been subjected to the conditioning field, and we often are making decisions based on what we believe is correct, but is often is not in alignment with what we would really want to do if left to our own devices. So I just had this conversation with a gentleman today where, you know, he grew up in this very fundamental sort of Christian atmosphere, and he has an open head and an open ajna. And that means that his thinking is one of questioning. So he's madly questioning his parents and his family, or his pastors in his church, about why or what or how to, you know, and they're thinking, well, you just stop asking those questions, but he can't. He can't, because his true self is open-minded, not fundamental. So that sets up this, you know, so a dogma to him is going to be untenable. But he was trying to fit himself into this dogma for, how old was he? 49, 48 years. So for 48 years of his life, he's been trying to fit into this dogma that doesn't suit him. Right. So we are all doing that in some way, somewhere in our lives, where we're trying to make ourselves fit into some kind of pattern or mold that might not even be of our own making, that we're assuming that this is what we, you know, it's a myth that we're living out instead of our truth.
Sure. Now, you mentioned the human design chart. You very kindly offer a freebie if people go to your website. So if they're listening to us for the first time, they need to know that www.living-astrology.com will find your website. And there they can read lots and ask for the human design chart.
Yeah, they can even request their own astrology chart. And I'm working on updating that now to include a type of report that they can get that will, you know, give them some information on astrology as well. But the human design, I'm really working up to a new kind of signature, if you will, of my work that is embracing both astrology and human design. I'm calling it astro design. And it's really going to be important as time goes on for me to see, to inform people of both their astrology and their human design, because they do dovetail quite nicely. And, you know, one shows more of the transiting or activated energies, and the other one shows the energetic you and how you react and should interact with those energies. So I don't know how you can take one and not the other. I mean, certainly we do all the time. I could do just a human design reading, but I always want to fall back. I keep finding myself wanting to go and see what's that in their astrology chart? So I might as well just make that a part of what I do, which I'm doing, so that you can get both. Yeah. And I think it's important because it's holistic. It's amazing how holistic you can see yourself when you're looking through both systems.
Right.
Yeah. Like, for instance, this particular eclipse was also sitting at a gate in your human design, right? The sun was at the gate 20, the moon was at the gate 34. That forms a channel for power and the expression of power, but also having to have patience to respond to the right opportunities, not to just throw everything out, like what's that saying, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but actually being able to have a goal and work a plan that takes the best of whatever has been and matches it with something that's possible from the new, but being patient enough to wait for all of those circumstances to come together that point you in that direction, and then having the courage to act when it's all there, instead of going, "Ooh, is this right? No, I don't know." Do it.
Now, Helen Harris has joined us.
Helen.
Hello. And so has Londa.
Hi, Londa.
Londa says, last night during the eclipse, I had a dream of a mother dragon feeding baby dragons on her underbelly. Ooh. They were suckling so vigorously. I was watching these babies be so nourished. The dragon was silver, which is connected to the Shekinah energy. Shekinah energy, divine feminine creation, working deeply with Mother Earth, as dragons are connected to the ley lines, creation lines, birthing, nourishing our creations. Well, isn't that's backing up what you have just said about how we need to be very aware of where we're at and how we feel about where we're at.
Yeah, well, and you know, dragons really represent our power. I mean, right there. I mean, there's a lot of power in dragon energy in general, and then you see the nurturing energy that's also in the dragon. But it can also be a warning to make sure that you're not, she said they were suckling vigorously, but is that sapping the mother's energy? Has she done enough to support herself so that she has enough to share? And as a model in our own lives, are we in that same situation? Are we giving away so much and doing so much because we're tempted to do that right now?
Yes.
But we're giving away too much, and we haven't really done the back work to keep ourselves nurtured, to empower ourselves. So it isn't just empowering others or being empowered to help others. It's also empowerment to help yourself and nurture yourself, because without that, you can't sustain helping others.
That's right.
And complicating that for you, Londa, is the fact that you're a projector, and projectors do not have access to that sustainable life force energy. But when they're invited in, and when they've taken care of themselves, then they have all the energy they need to be sustainable for whatever period of time that project is enacted or that opportunity that they've chosen to take action in is there for them. But it starts with nurturing yourself, all of it.
That is a very important,
thing to remember, because we are always, we're so eager to help because we're such loving people. I mean, people really are. They really want to help. But when you continue to help others without a sufficiency within, then you start creating a deficit in your own energy, and then you become not good to anybody at that point, right? You might fall sick, or you might have, just become lethargic or burned out and you can't do anything. So serving yourself first is not being selfish or egotistical. It's about knowing that, I have to have a strong, firm foundation, or everything's going to fall apart the minute I try to extend energy outward.
Indeed.
Right.
Yes, Londa says it felt like we were finally being nurtured. And also what you're talking about, nurturing ourselves is a great thing to ponder. I totally agree. We need to put ourselves top of the list.
Right. And that isn't selfish, right? That's not being selfish. That is being self-centered, which means that you're coming from your own power center then. You're not coming from a deficit. Coming from a deficit is not sustainable. And the name of the game is sustainability. How do we create sustainability? Well, we take care of ourselves first. And when we're doing, we have to go back and we have to remember, okay, I do need to eat, right? I do need to do certain things for myself. And then I can go back and re-engage in the outer world. It's important. Yeah.
Now, Janet, I know you prepared much for this show, and so shall we move on to the information you'd like to share?
Let's do. Actually, everything that we've been talking about is stuff I would like to share. So it's awesome. Everything is always perfect. But there are some other things that are coming up in the very near future that we are staring down the barrel at, one of which is a Mercury retrograde. And as much as we like to give Mercury retrograde a bad rap, I do. I'm a Gemini, and it's in Gemini this time. Thank you very much. So I'm feeling like, at times everything seems to fall apart, and then I turn around and it's all back together again. And so I'm kind of mystified as to what the bleep is going on here. But then I remember, oh yeah, we're in the shadow of Mercury's retrograde, and Mercury is retrograding on Saturday, starting on Saturday, and we'll take up the next few weeks. So I actually have a graphic about this. Let me see if I can share the screen. And well, that's not Mercury. Let's go. Now, why does my whole thing look different? See, this is the thing that just keeps happening to me. That when you and I were talking before the show started, I aligned everything that I wanted to share. And now for some reason, here we go. I just panicked. Is it sharing? Are you guys seeing Mercury prepares to retrograde?
Let's just see. I'm just checking here.
Hold on, I'm going to do something different
at the moment, but it should be there because.
Hold on, I'm going to find it.
There we go.
There's not a person on this planet who would ever say that I wasn't stubborn or tenacious. I will do this. So this is going to just help us see what is up ahead of us for Mercury retrograde. So Mercury has been in Gemini since May 3rd, and it is extended because of the retrograde cycle to be in Gemini until June 10th. And the retrograde itself is from May 29th to June 22nd. If you have your chart out and you want to know where is Mercury retrograde in my chart, find 25 to or 16 to 25 degrees in the chart, and that is the span of degrees that Mercury will retrograde in. He's already passed by most of those degrees now because he's already close to the 25-degree mark, and then he'll reverse himself and go backwards to the 16-degree mark, and then on June 22nd swing back forward and begin to move back through all of the same territory that he's been in. So whatever he's bringing up to the surface for you during this period of time is likely going to be mind related, right? It's going to have something to do with your thinking processes. It's going to be communication related, so something to do with the way you speak, or your emailing, or your correspondence with other people. And of course, then that also brings up our computers and all of the technology that we use to communicate with others. And those things may possibly have upsets built into them. And these aren't punitive. Like it's not punitive that 3 times yesterday my internet went out while I was talking with clients. Because I didn't do anything to deserve that. I mean, it just was something that was going on in the in the air. And Mercury being an air sign, it's going to affect the way that we think and the way that we talk and the way that we share information. And my information just kept getting cut off, right? So you just have to be able to go with the flow. But what I did notice that it gave me, even though I was slightly irritated that I was being knocked offline consistently, is that I was able to center myself before I went back on with that client to, reinstate my vibe, right? To get back. Maybe I'd gotten off track. So sometimes Mercury slows us down for a reason, right? And the reason might be because maybe we're getting too scattered, right? We might be, trying to attempt to climb Mount Everest, but without any climbing gear, right? That would be bad. So,
yes.
So sometimes Mercury in retrograde is causing us to slow down, think differently, think more deeply before we actually speak, but also to look at the contents of your mind and what story is the mind telling? Is it a story that's empowering, or is there something that needs a rewrite that needs to be done? Is there an edit that needs to be done in the whole scheme of things? So when Mercury is in Gemini, we're especially quick thinking. We love the conversation, right? Have that conversation with people. We follow our curiosity. We're sociable. We can be very witty and we, want to share information, but we also have to watch out for that scattered thinking, for doing too many things at one time, like losing our focus. Also, part of communication is listening. Now, Gemini, being the consummate conversationalist, might sometimes in a retrograde situation be needing to listen, right? Are you really hearing what the person is saying? So slowing down is a part of that as well. So not forgetting that, to be a good speaker requires you to also be a good listener, to have a conversation, right? We have a couple of dates to watch for during this period of time, during June. And that is on June 10th, the Sun in a conjunction with Mercury. This is part of Mercury's regular cycle. And it happens, this is the inferior conjunction, meaning it's between the Sun and Earth, instead of the last one, which was on the other side of the Sun. So this one brings it more personal to us, right? And it gives us access to rethinking, reimagining. Almost anything you could put the word re or the prefix re in front of comes up for us during a Mercury retrograde. And then when the Sun conjuncts Mercury at this period of time, then it's like seeding new ideas, right? Maybe a new way of thinking, a new way of doing something, maybe something that hadn't occurred to you before. And sometimes because it's retrograde, it could be bringing back an old idea. Maybe you're resurrecting something that you thought of months ago, but didn't have time to implement. And now, voila, you can do something about it. And then on June 22nd, Mercury will turn direct at 16 of Gemini and start to move back through for the second time, the third time really, the degrees that he has already been in. And then he'll quickly pick up speed and move off into the sign of Cancer. Not long, I think it's July 12th, actually, he's into the sign of Cancer, changing up the energies once more. But for now, we are caught up in this communication and mind sort of energy that we have to work with. Yeah, but not necessarily in a bad way, just.
I like the way you say that you can see the positive in what happened for you yesterday. And I think that's important, that we realize things do happen for a reason, and it might appear to be bad or negative, but in actual fact, no, there's a hidden gem in there.
Here's another gem that could have been in there, is that the disruption, first of all, I thought the disruption was on the other end. I thought it was the other person whose service had gone out. But then I realized as I looked at my equipment and it's all flashing, I'm like, oh, wait, that's my problem. But then I thought about it, besides it giving me a chance to redirect and reorient my energy, it could also be something that helps the other person reorient and get ready again to listen to what I was sharing with them. So we never know. right? And for us to always think it's doom and gloom, or, somebody beat me up again, or the universe, just dumping on me, think about where's the benefit in this? And maybe it's not visible on the surface. Maybe you only notice it later. Oh yeah, like that was probably a good thing. Help me get refocused. So try to see that the glass half full rather than glass half empty is part of the experience we're having right now with this. Now, of course, the Mercury retrograde is happening this particular Saturday. Now, this is a different kind of astrology, and that is the Pleiadian Earth astrology. Didn't even get my calendar out, doggone it. That we are entering into a very powerful collective shadow period. So for those of you who listen to my morning show, you've heard me talk about this. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Sorry, you need to be able to see this. The Pleiadian Earth energy calendar was written by, was channeled basically through Pia Orlean and Cullen Baird Smith. And the calendar takes us into living in natural cycles of time, 13-day weeks. So you can see there, the calendar in the little tiny numbers here are the Gregorian calendar numbers. The bigger numbers are the day of the week. It is in the cycle, the spiral of consciousness. So we see here we are, I'm doing this in a mirror. Back right here today, we started a new 13-day spiral of consciousness, or a new week at one self-regulating. So every time we have a new day of the week, it sets up the tone, if you will, for the next 13 days of our spiraling evolution of consciousness. But what's happening is on the same day that Mercury, you can't really see it here, but this is white and this becomes gray. And then the next 2 days are gray, that we're starting this shadow period, and the shadow period runs all the way through the 17th of June.
Oh, wow.
So you see the 17th up here in the little corner. And this is a time period which happens on a regular basis. Every 260 days, we enter a collective shadow period where the shadows start showing up, right? So we see the dark side coming up in the outer world, the things that we are afraid of. So I spent a lot of time with people this week in my broadcasts talking about love, because the only truth in the planet is that love prevails. If you're in fear, or if you are in any of the shadow energies, dissatisfaction, anger, anything that isn't love, then you're in fear, and that's probably going to pop up on our screens for these next 20 days. So having that concurrent, just coming out of an eclipse and having it be when Mercury turns retrograde, and having it not over yet at the next eclipse, right? So we have an eclipse, we have Mercury retrograde, then we have another eclipse, and that whole time, pretty much we're in the shadow energy. So a lot of what may be popping up for people for these next 20 days or so is going to be related to what they're afraid of, related to what they're afraid may happen, or what they're afraid won't happen. And so we are all of us, because we're collectively on this planet together, we hold very powerfully this field of fear on this planet. It girds the whole planet. But every time one of us decides to choose love over fear, we start to chip away at the strength of that field. And let me tell you, we need to chip away at that field in a big way. So here's something that we can do to personally empower ourselves and the collective, and that's by healing our own fears, turning them into love. So it's an important next 20 days. And the potential is that we're going to see a lot of kabooms going on in the outer world. I noticed there was some kind of shooting today in California, and I'm like, oh, here we go, shadow period, right? 8 people died in this shooting. What's the fear? Well, the fear is people with guns kill people. Or the fear is I can't even go to work and not get shot. Or we can go on and on. But if we fall victim to the fear, we keep the fear shield in place. When we rise above it, when we apply love, then we allow that to start to disintegrate. And we each have that power to help in disintegrating that. That's what the collective shadow period is all about. Now, some of you won't feel it personally. It may be that you just see this outer world and it looks like madness, right? The earth may even kick up a fuss with storms or volcanoes or earthquakes, because the earth is also going through this evolution of consciousness. And she's, in same sort of boat we are. She's evolving and ascending, if you will. And since we're life forms on her, we are also in that same change and evolution. So expect that there may be some craziness for the next 20 days. Don't personalize it. Don't tap into the fear of it. Rise above that and apply love and see it with different eyes, right? That's the potential.
Now, thank you, Janet. And Helen Harris has a very interesting comment, because she says, I generally find Mercury retrogrades very productive. Now, took me a long time to find peace with it, though.
Yes. And I wonder then, Helen, if you have Mercury retrograde in your natal chart, because if you do, like I do, right, I have Mercury in retrograde in my natal chart, which means that during the retrograde itself, from the retrograde on to the end of the retrograde, I'm actually, kind of cranking right along, doing really well. It's that shadow period that gets me. This time period before, and then the time period right after, where it's like everything starts to, go fuzzy on me. So it reminds me that, okay, I'm going to have to slow down, that my natural state of being, because of Mercury retrograde in my natal chart, is to slow things down, to think more deliberately, right? To be more engaged, more focused, more aware when I'm talking or doing anything, so that I stay conscious and not just unconsciously flip through my day. So
isn't that ideally what we all can be doing, is staying in the moment?
Yes, because I was just going to say, and even if you have Mercury in forward or direct motion in your chart, what you're saying has value, that you've learned through experience how to deal with what other people find as an awkward time of the year when we go into these Mercury retrogrades.
Well, Helen has commented, that makes sense, because this week has been extra hard and overwhelming.
Yeah, there's just such a pile of things that are on us, right, with the eclipse. And, to back things up a bit, let me see if I have the other graphic that I wanted to share with you guys. Hold on, because I know I have it, because I did it.
Yes.
And here we go. In the background, let me share the screen again, go back to Zoom. In the background, we are still experiencing Saturn in a square to Uranus. Now, this is big news, because Saturn represents the old guard, if you will, right? The old traditional ways that we've always held to, or that civilization has held to. And Uranus represents what's new, what's innovative, what's cutting edge, right? The cutting edge of technology. And these two have been in a challenging aspect to one another since early in January, since actually late 2020. And this entire year, all of 2021, they're very close to one another. So in the background of everything else that's happening is this clash of the old and the new, right? Of the what's always been the old "Make America Great Again" kind of saying, up against the more liberal view of, well, what's coming for the future? Let's take care of one another for the future. So you have the future and the past sort of coming to loggerheads. And there are 3 dates in this year where they come into an exact square, but they're never far from one another throughout the whole year. And it just so happens in June, we come to the next exact square. And literally it's activated from April 11th to July 5th, with June 14th being the exact. And this is the struggle during this period of time, attuning to new thought patterns and eliminating old patterns. Now apply that both personally and collectively in the middle of a shadow cycle, and you could see that there's likely struggle that's going to happen here. There's likely a dynamic of battle in some way, a battle of wills, a battle of the old versus the new. How do we move forward but take the best of the past with us? And how do we not get stuck in the past and refuse to move forward? So this has been a titanic struggle. Titanic, as in Saturn and Uranus were both titans. Titans were these very powerful beings. And when they came into clashing, well, you can see the picture here is of Uranus castrating his father Saturn. It's basically the old taking over from the new, taking over from the old. So it's a huge dynamic that comes up into our consciousness and then recedes a little bit, but never is far away. We have another one on December 24th when it comes to exact. The struggle then will be about aligning emotional energy to create sufficiency and sustainability in our communities, right? Well, we will be faced with such issues that we have to do things in a new way. And that's partly what's happening now. The first struggle was about envisioning a world where that is everybody is nourished and thrives. The next one struggle was attuning to those new thought patterns that can help eliminate the old patterns. And then finally aligning ourselves emotionally, heart and mind. So lots of work happening in behind the scenes at the same time. So it's pretty amazing. There's a lot on our shoulders right now.
There is. And again, another interesting point, Janet, hearts and minds. You know, we need to come from our heart. That old mind and the monkey chatter, that's where the fear comes from. And of course, the love comes from our heart. So the more we can come from our hearts, the better off we are. And so is mankind and this planet.
And we're all in it together. You can't say, well, this isn't my monkey, this is not my circus. That's not going to work here because you're a part of the collective. Yes. And you are a part of the problem, or you could be a part of the solution. And the solution, of course, the antidote to all of this is pushing into the new with a heart that's open and that is aligned with love. That is the antidote. Hands down, the antidote is always going to be love. Love of one another, love in the bigger, capacity. The organizing principle of the universe is love. So loving that ourselves, loving being in the physical, loving our mother planet here. So we have loving of spirit. We're really, the best thing we can do now is every step that we can take to align our spirit and our human selves, right? To really embody spirit. That will help take us a long way with this Saturn square Uranus playing in the background, stirring up things, right? So the next thing I wanted to show everybody is the new moon solar eclipse. I think that is over here. Yes. So I'm sharing again. Thank you so much for letting me share my screen.
Well, thank you for knowing how to do it, Janet. I think that's fabulous.
But it's so illustrative too, right? I mean, words are great, but when you have a picture to go with the words, it solves a lot of problems.
Makes it much easier. Yeah, I agree.
Now, when we get to the new moon, so the nodes of the moon, we talked about this a bit this morning on the show. The nodes of the moon really drive where the eclipses are going to happen, because they're the spot where the moon's shadow, if you will, is crossing over the northern ecliptic plane and the southern ecliptic plane. The northern one would be the north node, or the destiny, the direction we're moving in. The southern crossing is where the karma is, or where our gifts and our talents, all of the experiences of all of our lifetimes is held. The difference between the two eclipses then is one is often related to the south node, what we're holding on to, what needs to be changed, while the other one is showing us the new direction. And it just so happens that it was the south node eclipse, the full moon lunar eclipse, that happened first. So we're faced with, in the full moon lunar eclipse, what might need to be released or let go of in order to be able to be ready for the new, for the innovative, for the new direction. So when we get to this new moon solar eclipse, it is going to be a north node eclipse, which means it is showing us the direction, what comes next. And here's our sun and moon. They are in a conjunction at 19 degrees, 47 minutes of Gemini. Clearly, that's very close to 20 degrees. Wherever that is in your chart is where the eclipse is falling. Look who's close by. Mercury in retrograde at 20 degrees, 41 minutes, very close, within a degree, and the North Node holding about 9 degrees away, exactly 9 degrees actually. Note it's 1047 and this is 1947. So the North Node showing us the direction we need to go. Now, I thought it was much easier to determine what the themes were or are for that new moon by looking at human design. And the Sun, Moon, and Mercury, all three of these heavenly bodies that are personally affective in our lives, are at the gate 45 in human design, in quantum human design. It's called the gate of distribution. And it is a gate that is teaching us about how to share resources equitably. Where right now it's the wealthy and the rich get to have more because they can buy more, money buys more, where the people who don't have as much money don't get as much access to resources, right? Try to get a college education if you're poor, right? Or if you're a working person. And yet if you are the child of a wealthy family, not only can you probably buy the education, you can even, or had been able to buy your way into the best colleges. So there's something unequal there. That's not equitable. That isn't giving people equal access to resources. So this particular eclipse shows us that that's way out of alignment. And this is the next coming impact, is when people demand that resources be shared equally, that everybody is deserving of an equal opportunity. Not based on skin color, not based on race, not based on wealth, but based on equality, that we all should have the same equal access to everything, right? So big changes coming here, because this is a new moon solar eclipse. It's the potential for the future. Wow. And then when we look at the North Node, the North Nodes in human design right now are sitting at a gate that is on the throat center, the gate 16, which is called the gate of enthusiasm, where we're being primed. And by the way, gate 45 is also on the throat center. So this is a place of manifestation, where the words that we put to something become very important in the creation of something, right? God said in the beginning, let there be light. And there was light. So it connects the throat, the larynx to manifesting, right? So being able to say something brings it power to manifest. So how are we speaking about issues around equal distribution of resources? Well, often it's labeled as lack and scarcity versus abundance. So we're going to have to work on how do we equalize our language around this so that we can create a new pathway. So again, when we're at the lack and scarcity piece, we're in the fear. We're in the shadow energy. We're not in the loving energy. So a part of our next experience is in about how do we reimagine, how do we reverbalize our experiences? How do we tell a new story? And that's not to say that the past has been true. It's not saying that it's not been true. It's just saying, okay, but we're choosing what comes next, how we are going to live out the next level. So both gates on the throat center are Gemini gates. So it's Gemini energy, which is always creative in terms of finding new ideas and possibilities. My favorite keyword for the year, possibilities. What more is possible? Right? Is it possible that we could find a new way to equally distribute resources? Hell yes, it is. We have to have the will to do it. We have to have enough of us up there saying, let's do this equal distribution thing. Let's think of ideas that will work for everyone instead of, having this big disparity. And that's not just here in the US, by the way, that's around the world. There's disparity. So this isn't just a USA problem. This is a global. Yeah. And a global potential. Some countries are better at articulating this. And I think we should take our cue from countries that are daring to do things outside of the norm. Iceland, teeny country with these great big banking ideas that have rocked the world. Working other countries, I think it's Spain and France, flirting with a 4-day work week rather than, demanding that we spend all of our time 8 to 10 hours a day at a job. And other countries have other ideas. Let's see what the potential is. Let's look at the possibilities. So what more is possible in your own life? That's where this is going to hit, right? Wherever you have Gemini, what more is possible? If it's in a specific house, like let's say it's in your relationship house, what more is possible in our relationship? If it's in your money house, what more is possible in my financial outlook, in my resources, or in my self-worth? So it's very personal in some ways, but it's also global in other ways.
Well, Janet, that's very, very informative.
It's almost too much, isn't it? I mean, I get almost breathless thinking about all this stuff, trying to write it and put it all together and, make it make sense to and accessible to everybody, because it's just so much.
Well, it is. The thing is, you can bring it back to a simple thought, and that is about living in love, living through love for ourselves and others.
Yeah, and that's very true. And that's been my drumbeat this whole week, is that let's bring it back to love, right? If it's not of love, then it's fear. Or if it's not, if it's in the shadow, it's not love. So return it to love.
Yes.
Big deal.
A wonderful comment to finish this show on. It has been a wonderful show, Janet. Another wonderful show. Thank you for your input, and thank you to our audience for their input. And I trust that we will look at Mercury in retrograde in a slightly different way, embracing it rather than fearing it.
Righto. And every planet in retrograde, because all the outer planets are going into retrograde too. So we don't have to be fearful of a retrograde at all.
Use it, find it productive.
Find
someone in our audience did.
Yeah.
So let us stay in the moment, let us stay in love, and let us be the best that we possibly can be as we welcome in June. Thank you so much, Janet.
Thank you, Annette.
Everybody.
Take care.
See you all next week, and Janet, I'll see you next month.
Indeed.
How fantastic.
Yes. I'll have more to share then.